Welcome to the Exec Exchange, 15-minute podcast in which a leader from the water sector shares a story to inspire, educate, and inform the water sector from across the globe. My name is Piers Clark, and today my guest is Gavin van Tonder from NEOM, or ENOWA. I think we're going to hear about the differences between NEOM and ENOWA, and we're going to be talking about how you prepare a water utility for 100% renewable energy. Gavin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Piers. Thank you for having me today.
So you like to start with learning a little bit about your background. Now, your background's really interesting because you're not from the water utility side, you're from the water sector, but you came from the supply side, from Itron. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. In fact, in order to start up the strategy around NEOM, they didn't want, let's say, a water utility or somebody that had been in the water utility background. They wanted someone more from a technology perspective because we were building something completely from scratch. So I was the president of Itron Water, based in the US in Austin, where we sold mainly in the beginning water meters, water sensors, heat meters, and leak sensors and technology around measurements. And then we started to transfer that company into a services company, and we did hundreds of utilities where we actually did a lot of non-revenue water services from beginning to end.
So when was it that they approached you and said, come and play over here?
Let's say in April 2018, I was approached by the then CEO of NEOM, which was the ex-CEO of Siemens at the time. And we had a partnership with Siemens, so he knew of me and he approached me to come and do this. And as you can imagine, at that time, NEOM was really just a dream.
Yeah. Well, and so now let's come to talking about what the dream of NEOM was. And let's assume that there are some people listening to this who haven't heard about the NEOM project. So can you outline what the NEOM project is and also the relationship between ENOWA and NEOM?
Yes, so NEOM is a very large area the size of Belgium that is being developed in the northeast on the border of Jordan, northeast part of Saudi Arabia. And it's this new facility, let's say, region which has a bunch of different developments, one of them being the line. Many people would have heard of this big line.
Yeah, it's got a lot of the press attention, hasn't it, the line?
Yeah. But it's not only the line. There's a mountain resort called Trojena. There's a development along the coast of Aqaba called Magna. There's some islands, Sandala and Susha. And there's an Oxygen, which is a development area for industrial zones. So it's quite a large region, and we're building it up virtually from scratch. And at this stage of the game, we're just laying all the infrastructure for transmission and distribution and storage, and then we head into the distribution.
Okay, so it's essentially a blank sheet of paper in a pristine environment in the northwest of Saudi Arabia. It's got coral reefs, it's got glorious mountains, and the job there is to build the world's first truly environmental city that will have all of these things. So the line is this half a mile wide, half a mile high, many miles long city. I'm probably simplifying it a bit, but that's the sort of ambition of it. So blank sheet of paper, pristine environmental area. How many people is the city expected to serve when it's fully created?
Well, as you can imagine, this is a very, very long-term project, only planned to finish in, past 2050, more 2080, and destined for around 9 million people in the whole region. So it's going to be here and under construction for a very long time. And, our focus is, as you said, on sustainability, circular economy, fully renewable energy system, and looking after the environment. And we only plan to build on 5% of the land actually in South America.
Yeah. Okay. That's another one of the magic facts. I keep forgetting the 5% of the land is the only bit that's going to be built upon, rather than, as you say, most cities is 95%, 5% left for sort of scrubs. Okay. So we get the sense of your backgrounds from the water sector, but the technology side. And the scale, I assume you were sold on the dream, not because it wasn't that here's something that's up and running. It was, we need someone with the skill set to help build this, help fill this blank canvas. That was essentially the pitch to you in 2008.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, the whole intent was to start from scratch and build it out, let's say a digital water utility focused on bringing all the expertise from around the world. So it's not just one person. So, the job was to hire all the people that I thought could come and bring their knowledge to this. So there's, of course, people from water utilities, there's people from technology providers, etc. So we are around 200.
You've been playing the equivalent of water industry fantasy football, haven't you? You've been finding the best people around the world that you can pull in and put into particular role positions.
That's 100% correct. And for that, for some of the people that are probably going to be listening to this, I do apologize for stealing some of your best people.
Excellent. All right. We promised that this was going to be about how to prepare a water utility for 100% renewable energy. Now, I think there isn't a utility on the planet that isn't aspiring to increase their amount of renewables. You've started, of course, you've had the benefit of a blank sheet of paper. You haven't had to deal with legacy assets. But let's get to the topic of how do you prepare to be 100% renewables as a utility? What did you do?
So this is one of the key questions that we had, given that renewable energy, when you have sun and when you have wind, is very low cost. When you don't have sun and wind, it's very, very high cost. And the problem is, if you're fully renewable energy, you don't have a base load of gas or a base load of coal or base load of oil to be able to support. Of course, everyone has diesel generators as backup in case of failure, but at the end of the day, you're operating 100% of renewable energy. You're going to have to plan accordingly. The other aspect of that is that given that the future will be 100% renewable energy, and water can act as an enormous battery if you pump it up, and we have mountains that are 2.5 kilometers high inside NEOM, and a lot of the range runs along the coast. So we have high mountains that enables us to utilize water as a battery and be able to generate energy when we need it. For example, we're using pumped hydro. So it was important for us also to look at our infrastructure and say, if it is going to be renewable energy and you are going to have time and use pricing, how do you protect yourself against the very high costs of energy when there's no wind and no solar? So that was key for us to design the infrastructure out, that we took all of that into account.
Okay, so it's about understanding the assets you've got that you can play with because, so you're not using wave, are you? Power. You're not using any hydro power.
We are looking at wave technologies. We have two companies actually that are doing that came to us with innovation. They are now working inside NEOM with wave technologies, and one of them is using buoys that float in the sea with fronds, and another one is positioning them against the marinas and that in order to generate. But this kind of energy that you generate is very, very small. And localized.
I'm going to come to a minute. I'm going to ask you the question about how much comes from solar, how much comes from the different sources. But I think the first point you're making is understand absolutely the assets you've got that you can play with. If you've got mountains and reservoirs at height, you've got the ability to create a battery. If you're in a sunny area of the world, you've obviously got the ability for solar. If you're near a coastline, you've got the ability for wave. If you've got rivers, you can do things with in-river turbines. And then you've obviously got to map your needs against those to make sure you maximize the return you're going to get. And in NEOM, it's mostly solar and wind, and then using the reservoir as a battery. Are you doing anything with floating solar on your water body? Is the sea, isn't it? So doing floating solar is a bit of a challenge there. It's got to be wave energy.
Yes, the sea is not really conducive to us doing floating solar because it can be quite windy along the Gulf of Aqaba, and so it's not really beneficial to have floating solar. And also, in order to maintain the environment that we want, we're not really allowed floating solar onto the sea because it would impact, or we have coral reefs all along the coast, so it's not something that is of interest. We do look at floating solar maybe for the pumped hydro ponds or reservoirs that we would use. But in essence, we don't have any surface water to be able to utilize floating solar. So it'll be land solar, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going full steam ahead on huge swathes of land solar.
Yeah. And when you build solar on the land, does that count as part of your 5%?
It's a very good question. Depending on the impact it has on the environment, if it's not impacting the environment, then it doesn't count as the 5%. But in fact, most of the solar in the longer term will be built outside of the NEOM environment in the kingdom, because we have large swathes of land in the kingdom available for that.
Excellent. And now tell me about what about energy that you might be able to generate from your operational practices, such as biogas from uh, fermenting sewage sludge, or indeed in pipe hydro generation in your water network? Are either of those being looked at?
Yes. So for every wastewater treatment plant, we have zero liquid and zero solid discharge. We have to implement energy recovery from every wastewater treatment plant, and we have to have storage facilities so that it can be utilized in towns when the tariff is very, very high. So that is implemented. And then very much like Hong Kong actually does some in-pipe energy generation. So we are following that route. As you can imagine, we have a building that's 500 meters high.
Yeah.
We have a lot of energy there that's available for us to generate. So it's very, very important that we integrate in-pipe energy generation.
And I tend to regard them as recovery rather than generation, because you've got to pump the water up to the top, but it does give you the ability to recover back some of the energy that you've spent, rather than the genuine generation, which is obviously what solar. All right, tell me roughly the proportions. I get it'll vary month to month, day to day, season to season, hour to hour, but the proportions, is it 80% solar and the rest is 20%, or what's the mix?
Well, it depends on the timing, because it's going to be a very, very long project. So at the moment, I think it's, I'm not into the energy generation exactly, because it moves around quite a bit about land availability and what they develop out first. But at this point in time, I think it's around 60% solar and 25% is wind. And then they're looking at long duration energy storage batteries as well. And we plan to build a two-pumped hydro scheme as well. So that will also come in at a later stage. So it depends on the timing about which is where. But saying up all of that is very difficult, because if you don't know which is going to come online when, then it's difficult for you. So you've got to be able to be flexible.
So now we come to the key question, which is, okay, I get there's lots of variations. There's lots of things that can be done. But the key question is, how much has this cost you extra, in terms of real cold hard cash, but also this delaying the projects and slowing things down because you're waiting for new technology or finding the right expertise? What's been the biggest challenge in aiming to be 100% renewable?
Is that we don't have the full population, and as it grows, it's going to keep growing over time. So, for example, one of our big energy consumers, of course, will be the desalination plant. So preparing the desalination plant in the beginning for a large population enables you to only run the desalination plant when you have renewable energy available to you. And because it's reverse osmosis, you can shut down trains whenever you want to, and make sure you do it in the proper manner. You can have a large desalination plant that only operates when you have renewable energy, and then stop it from operating. And then as the population grows, obviously it'll fill that gap of you being able to only operate it at certain times. And then you start building the next trains. But the fact that the population is growing over time enables you to build larger things and operate only when you have renewable energy. And the same is said for storage facilities. We build a storage facility for a population of, let's say, 500,000 people at this, and that gives you a storage of 5 days. In the beginning, that's maybe a storage of 2 weeks, and you only pump into that storage tank when you have renewable energy, and then you deplete it in order just to keep the 5 days. So you would think that you would be spending a lot of money. You are spending more money up front, but you're planning for population growth, and that gives you the opportunity to be able to adjust your energy consumption.
Excellent. All right, Gavin, thank you very much for that window into what you're doing in Saudi Arabia. It's a fantastically ambitious project, and you should be rightly proud of the role you've taken over the last 6 years of taking what was someone else's dream and turning it into a genuine reality today. And this is going to be a project that outlives yourself and your children and grandchildren. With that in mind, let's just finish with, what's the best advice you've been given, what advice would you give a young Gavin van Tonder?
I think when we are young, we always think we know everything, and we always quite fixed on that we think we're doing the right thing at the right time. But I think what we fail to do is recognize what the older generation have actually done and learned from. And one of the key things was, even if you are young and you think you know better, never discount what the experience that people have had in the industry, because that experience has actually brought us into NEOM. Not just myself, but 200 other people have brought that experience in here in order to make sure that we try and do it right for the future, and that we do it in a sustainable manner.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gavin. You have been listening to the Exec Exchange with Piers Clark. I've been talking to Gavin van Tonder from NEOM. Please join us next time. Goodbye.